Thomas the Tank Engine loved taking his coaches Annie and Clarabelle all over his branch line. One of his favorite stations to stop at was Ellsridge. It was a decorative old-style station and looked like as if it has been the same for the past 100 years. Many frequent passengers would travel on Thomas's coaches, and he would listen to the various conversations amongst a crowd of people. One morning at the station, he overheard a conversation between a station porter and a woman with two boys. "He frightened my kids, telling them to buzz off aggressively." "Oh my, that's awful. Who do you think he is?" A man passing by overheard. "What do you expect from a recluse who lives with birds all day?" Thomas pondered what the passengers were talking about. "Excuse me, ma'am, but who might you be speaking of?" "We don't know his name, but we call him the Birdman. He's an older man who lives in that derelict shack near the tracks. My boys were simply playing nearby, and out he comes shrieking at them to get away," said the woman. "He's lived in that shack for decades," said the porter. "He doesn't cause much trouble, but he's a nuisance, really. Feeds the pigeons that live in cages in his yard. Bird crap ends up all over town," said the porter. Pondered Thomas, and he looked down the line where he saw the old shack in the distance. As his guard blew his whistle, Thomas left the station. He slowly passed the shack and could see the dirty scowl of a man in the window staring at him as he passed by. Thomas felt uncomfortable and quickly puffed away. As Thomas puffed down the line, he heard his fireman and driver talking. "I've heard a rumor that he's more bird than human," said Thomas's fireman. "Apparently molts and sheds feathers everywhere." "Stuff and nonsense," replied his driver. "Some people are just different, you know. You never really know someone until you actually get to know them," said his driver. Thomas pulled an empty Annie and Clarabelle back to Tidmouth. On his way, he was about to pass the derelict shack of the Birdman. He slowed down and swore he could hear something. It was singing. Singing coming from within the shack. It was a beautiful voice, but a somber tone. The door to the shack creaked open, and out stepped the Birdman. He was dressed in a long overcoat. His face was smudged in grease and dirt. He had torn pants held up only by a thin rope, and no shoes or shirt. He was singing a saddening-sounding song as he held in his arms a lone pigeon that was fast asleep. Thomas's mouth dropped. He watched the man step out and place the bird in his cage, before turning to go back into the shack. The man caught sight of Thomas staring. "I've asked you! Get out of here! Get out of here! Go away!" Thomas puffed away quickly. The next morning, Thomas took his passengers again at Ellsridge, where he saw the two boys from a few days prior, throwing rocks at the old man's shack. They hit some of the cages and they fell over and broke open, letting the pigeons inside loose. "Hey, get the hell out of here," said the Birdman. The birds went flying all over the place. The boys were laughing and dancing around as they caused all manner of destruction to the man's shack. Thomas was angered by what he saw. He quickly puffed up to the shack and frightened the boys away, telling them to leave him alone. His driver and fireman stepped out of the cab to shoot him away as well, and they ran away laughing. "Damn hooligans," said Thomas's driver. Thomas looked down at the Birdman. He was slowly picking up the broken pieces of wood and metal from the cages. "Are you okay?" asked Thomas. Nothing you would understand," said the man. "Now get out of here," he said quietly. Thomas's fireman looked kind of puzzled and stared ponderously at the old man's face. The old man snapped at the three again. "I said get out of here!" he lashed out. As Thomas finished his day, he backed into the sheds. Before his driver and fireman left, Thomas said something. "I think we should do something for the Birdman. Something nice for him. I don't think there's anything malicious about him at all," stated Thomas. Thomas was on his branch line the next day. He didn't have his coaches as there was no need. He asked the fat controller for a day free. He stopped by the Birdman shack where the broken cages still lay. His driver and fireman stepped out of his cab with tools and began to fix them. The Birdman woke up with a scowl and quickly ran out of his shack yelling at Thomas to go away before he stopped. and saw his driver and fireman putting the cages back together. He was in disbelief as the cages were fixed. His birds began to come back, and the Birdman began to smile. Soon all the cages were fixed. "Good as new, right, Birdman?" asked Thomas. "Yes, and they're coming back." "Thank you," he said quietly. "And I do have a name, you know." "I'm sorry if I offended you. Your name is?" "Steve, and none taken." "I should get back to work. I gotta take extra precautions so those little brats don't come back to mess with my birds," stated the Birdman. "We're very sorry about that," stated Thomas's driver and fireman. The Birdman sighed. "They're kids. What are you gonna do? I can't trust anybody anymore. I always found peace in my birds. It's always people I can't trust." "Oh, people aren't so bad once you get to know them. Like you, for instance, Steve," said Thomas. "I'll show you that you could trust some people." "I don't know," said the Birdman. "Oh, come on, ride in my cab. We've got places for you to see." Thomas took Steve the Birdman all over the island. First to Knapford to show him the bustling station, and then to Brenham to see the many-colored sails of sailboats and the oceanside views. Then to the Skarloey Railway at Crovan's Gate, where Thomas's driver and fireman treated him to coffee and cakes. It was late afternoon by the time they returned to Ellsridge. "Did you have fun, Steve?" asked Thomas. "Oh, very much so. I especially love Brenham. That oceanside seems so beautiful and peaceful. And thank you two for a wonderful evening, treating me to coffee and taking me to all these places," said the Birdman happily. "This is the first time anyone has done something for me in years. It's really a treat," said Steve. Thomas rolled up to Steve's shack and found it in shambles. Him, his driver, and fireman gasped. Broken cages lay strewn about. The birds were gone, and spray-painted on the walls read, "Get out." Thomas couldn't believe it. Neither could his driver or fireman. But Steve the Birdman didn't react. "Don't worry, Steve, we can rebuild them. Your birds will come back." The driver, fireman, and Thomas all looked at Steve. Steve wore a sulking frown. "Of course they'll come back. They're birds. I trust them. It's people I don't trust. But I guess that's just human nature to fear the unusual." Steve glanced at the walls of his shack. "I think I will leave, because there are other birds out there that need me." "No, Steve, you don't have to go," said Thomas. "Thomas, I want to. It's time for me to move on. Don't worry, though. I'll find somewhere else to establish myself. I'm sure of it. Goodbye, Thomas. You taught me that some people can be trusted." And Steve grabbed some stuff from his shack and began to walk into the woods, disappearing from sight. A few days had passed. Steve's shack was taped off and condemned by the town of Ellsridge. Thomas felt awful that Steve was basically forced out of town to live elsewhere. But he had a feeling in his firebox that Steve was out there helping and healing and caring for some more birds. As he watched a flock of pigeons fly off into the tops of the trees within the woods and up a hill into a small cave. "Should we try to get him to come back?" Thomas asked his driver. "I think Steve is doing just fine where he is. He's a kindred spirit if I've ever seen one," replied his driver.